The New York Times forced to make a major correction after publishing a story implying UN Ambassador Nikki Haley dropped over 52 grand on curtains. Here's the original headline. Nikki Haley's view of New York is priceless. Her curtains, $52,701. Turns out, though, Nikki Haley had absolutely nothing to do with it. The curtains were bought by the Obama administration. Unbelievable smear and mischaracterization, Dana.
Yes.
And they corrected it, to be fair, but...
And they corrected it within the same day, right? So it's that they didn't even wait till tomorrow, although I hope that it will be in the paper
That's
tomorrow.
because they got hammered all day for this, and when they do the correction in the paper, it's going to be really small, right down at the corner.
But thankfully, with social media, it's gotten all around, and it made its own segment on the 5 in the middle of hurricane coverage. One of the things about media bias that I've complained about, I don't like to complain about media bias all the time. I think it's a little bit of a weak thing, but that conservatives can make arguments that win on the merits. But the media will often do subtle digs and constant digs with headlines, photographs, and captions. And especially, you'll see like pictures, if they, for example, President Obama has never taken a bad picture.
Never.
You've never seen a bad picture of President Obama. You can find plenty of bad pictures of Republicans.
Right. I think Obama's pictures with the halo in the background is looking very majestic. But President Trump has some pretty good... He can't take a bad picture, right?
Absolutely not.
Of course not. But if he did, it would be in the New York Times. Greg, it said the apartment that she's in is $52,000 a month, about the same as your apartment here in Manhattan, which is pretty nice.
Yes.
Pretty nice.
No way. $52,000 a month?
For the apartment that Nikki Haley is in, but it has majestic views of the city, and she has to entertain, and she needs security. But I think the thrust of the article was, before they got caught, was Nikki's living large off the taxpayer, and the State Department slashing the budget and shutting down programs. But they got caught.
I would like to say it is curtains for the New York Times. This is actually worse than a mistake or a lie, because it's intentionally misleading.
Right.
In the story, it was 6 paragraphs down.
I don't know if that's fair. Intentionally misleading.
I think, no,
maybe they just bad reporting.
No, let me finish. It was in the article. It was in the article that Obama had ordered the curtains, so the story was framed in a certain way that was misleading, as if it was Nikki Haley's choice.
Yep.
Somebody had read the story and still put that headline. So it's pretty scummy what they did. They knew what they were doing were wrong, and the only reason why they changed it is because there are people who scream media bias. I mean, it's media bias may come off as weak sometimes, but some people have to say it, or no one will ever get called on it.
I didn't mean that as a criticism of people who say media bias. I just say, like, I think that there is some obvious stuff like this. I do think that there are times when conservatives don't try to make great arguments that they could make and just hide behind media bias.
And Katie, not only did the Obama administration pay for these curtains, the New York Times quotes an Obama administration official later in the article saying, oh, I can't believe the Trump State Department is spending all this cash.
A White House official in the Obama administration is quoted on the record slamming the Trump administration for cutting, the budget at the State Department and saying, how can you pay for a $50,000 customized curtain system for the ambassador to the UN? And it's like, you guys paid for it. This was under John Kerry. Where's the question about that? And the Times did issue a correction.
Yes.
However, I don't think it actually was a completely fair correction. I think that the entire story should have been retracted, because without Nikki Haley in the story, it wasn't a story. And if you look at the language they use in the correction that they have, as you said, that will be at the bottom of the page, they say that they created an unfair impression when really it was a completely false allegation. And as Greg said, they admit in the story multiple times that this happened in 2016 and was already paid for. And so this idea that they used her photo, saying they shouldn't have used her photo, they're sorry for that, the entire story wouldn't have existed if Nikki Haley wasn't the center of the story. They should retract the entire thing and rewrite it.
The most revealing thing about the article and about the allegation and about the smear is, when I grew up around here. So you grew up thinking that the New York Times was like the Bible, like, it was God's word. I did in my, maybe in your house you didn't, but in my house we did.
That or the Post.
And I remember in Hurricane Katrina, there was a story written that said that I pushed a rescue worker out of the way so I could be filmed saving a nun in a flooded building. Then they I said that's a lie. It did never happen. We showed them all the video, the outtakes and everything else. The New York Times ultimately, reluctantly, even after the editorial refused to correct it, the public editor wrote a story.
That's terrible.
But you couldn't,
but the revelation that they were just as political as the New York Post or any of the tabloids was, to me, like a real disabusing.
But why Geraldo's story is probably really most important is that you only know about media bias until a story is written about you. Like people do not understand what it is until you are either interviewed or you are the subject of a story and you go, this is not how it happened. I swear this is not how it happened.
Yeah.
So there should be a book of those stories of people that
There's
were
plenty of them. It could be not just a book, it could be a set.
Yeah, it's a set. I was interviewed by the New York Times. This is what it was. This is how it happened.
Well,
Don't get me started on Puerto Rico and how, all these people that died in the storm in Puerto Rico that I covered for over 2 weeks, that I a property owner in Puerto Rico, my father, one of 17 children. Like they're saying all these people died in the storm. 70% of the power was out before the storm.
Yeah.
So when did people start dying? When was it on Hurricane Maria that the people started? Was it when the power went out? Well, I was there one time and it was a transformer fire and the power went out. When they started dying then? I mean, at what point do you recognize that what they're doing is a political agenda couched in the nice language of journalism?
All right.
I like when he said, "Don't get me started."
And then he
I get started. It's going to be good.
I get wound up in a
roll
minute.
out.
I have a short fuse.
They reported a story about a U.S. ambassador early this morning that turns out to be totally false. The New York Times hit piece indicated that Nikki Haley had spent nearly $53,000, indicated, on curtains in her residence in New York, except guess what? It wasn't Trump's State Department. It was Obama's. So the Times is now walking back that story. Like, if you're going to do a hit job, don't fall flat on your face, my friends. Joining me now with the reaction is Howie Kurtz, the host of Media Buzz, which airs Sundays here on FNC. Howie, how are you? Big news night for a Friday night. And we have to hit this Nikki Haley thing first, because this seems reminiscent of the Ben Carson spending too much money and Scott Pruitt flying around on and now it's Nikki Haley. Something didn't ring true to me when I heard it. What really happened?
One of the worst headlines I have ever seen in the New York Times or any other newspaper trying to paint Nikki Haley as some kind of out-of-control Scott Pruitt spending tens of thousands of dollars on unnecessary luxuries. Except when you read down to the fourth paragraph of the story, it says that she had nothing to do with this purchase of these $50,000 curtains. It was the Obama State Department, as you say. And the editor's note says, well, gee, we created an unfair impression and we should not have focused on Nikki Haley. What was missing is two things. One is the story should have been obliterated, blown up, digitally erased because it no longer has any reason to be, and there should be an apology from the paper to Nikki Haley.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that there was an editor's note. Who reads an editor's note? That's like way down at the bottom of the story. I mean, that's it? They're able to do that at the New York Times, assail her character, which essentially is what it was, and then add a little blip at the end?
Well, at least there was some acknowledgement of all the criticism with the editor's note. I just don't think the editor's note went far enough. Not only was it a bad headline, when you say that it was unfair to frame this as a Nikki Haley expenditure, then the story simply has no reason
But Howie,
to be.
they should be publishing above the fold in tomorrow's paper, a print edition, if they want to gain a shred of credibility back. Because the New York Slimes, I'm sorry, it's what they are now, is proving themselves to be another extension of the DNC. That's all it is. DNC, Obama, Hillary, whatever it is, but the old gray lady should be red-faced with shame after just that one piece. I got to ask you about this Ronan Farrow getting this memo, though, today. And again, it's the same letter that Dianne Feinstein gets. He gets it. Then he goes on TV and starts talking about it. Well, he won the Pulitzer Prize. He has a lot of credibility in reporting these issues. Obviously, Weinstein, what NBC did to stop that story, and other cases like it. But I was kind of surprised that he decided to kind of like go on television and talk about this, given how thin and how old and how uncorroborated this particular allegation is.
Yeah. Well, before Ronan Farrow did that today, I think most of the media were sort of cautious about what had all the earmarks of a late hit. I mean, mysterious letter, anonymous accuser about something that may allegedly have happened when Brett Kavanaugh was 17 years old. But Ronan Farrow, because of his credibility in reporting on Harvey Weinstein, on Les Moonves, sort of gave the rest of the media cover to now go on TV and yak about it. He did not interview this woman. He got a hold of the memo. And, you know, I admire his reporting, but I think it's fair to point out that he worked for the Obama State Department.
Again, I will say, what he did on the other stories, that's called shoe leather reporting. This is taking a little gift wrapped up from Dianne Feinstein and going on television and say, okay, everybody else, you're clear. You have covered to go off and talk about this as if it's something that happened, 5 years ago in his office over there at the D.C. Circuit. I'm telling you, this is an insult to real assault cases and real sexual harassment. Women who've been victimized should see this for what it is, a pure political attack, late hit on a great man. I really appreciate you. Go ahead, last word.
We just don't know the details because the accuser is anonymous. And unlike Anita Hill, who at least testified and was cross-examined, the media need to be extraordinarily careful, Laura, about not being used in an 11th hour smear.
I appreciate it.